Welcome Janine, Elizabeth and Joe, and welcome everyone who is either in this session right now or watching back on demand. I've got three brilliant guests with me tackling the subject of innovation in assessment today. We have about 35 minutes, so we're going to try and get absolutely the most out of that time, and you'll be very familiar with the chat function now. So do post questions in there, post comments, post links. I'll pick out as many as possible. To run through who we have in this session, I'd like to welcome Janine Oliver, who's the Head of Assessment for Innovation with NCFE. Hello, Janine.
Hello, nice to be here. Thank you for inviting us.
You're very welcome. Also, Elizabeth Lawal, Programme Manager for Inco Academy UK. Welcome, Elizabeth.
Hello, thank you for having me.
And finally, Joe Wilson, Head of Digital Skills for City of Glasgow College and also the Chair of Association for Learning Technology Scotland. So welcome, Joe.
Hello, and I'm the co-chair of the Scottish Special Interest Group for the Association of Learning Technology, but glad to be here.
Wonderful, thanks, Joe. And Anthony Bravo, the principal for Basingstoke College of Technology, who's also a trustee for UFI, unfortunately couldn't make the session, but he kindly made a video for us ahead of today's, which is on the Week of VocTech page for assessment. So do go and check that out if you're interested in hearing his thoughts on assessment and how it can be improved. So we'll get straight into it. This session is all about demonstrating that innovation in assessment is possible, to share who is doing what, and to also really think about what we want from assessment. So why is it useful? I will turn now to Janine Oliver, Head of Assessment Innovation for NCFE. Janine, why is it important to start this chat by challenging the assumption that nothing can ever change in how assessment is done?
I think it's really important. So in July 2020, we carried out an engagement activity across multiple stakeholders in the education sector. So from learners, providers and colleges, academics and even regulators themselves, to really challenge what assessment is, what it should be, the purpose within technical and vocational education, and what people wanted for the future. And what was really interesting for me was that across all stakeholders, including regulators, there was a real desire to drive innovation and to drive change. However, there were really different views about the barriers that were preventing people from doing that. So you would have learners who thought that they had to do things in a very specific way for their provider or their college. You would have their college or the providers doing things in a very specific way and not wanting to challenge their awarding or assessment organisations. And likewise, those assessment and awarding organisations having a real fear in some instances of changing things for the fear of regulation, or a genuine belief that regulation prevented them from driving innovation. And actually, when you have a look at all of those different stakeholders, nobody has anything out there that categorically says you can't make changes. We did a lot of work, like I said, looking at the different barriers, and what was really clear from that work as well is that over the last decade, there have been multiple reports published about things that need to change within assessment or within the education sector. But what isn't there are examples of tested, proven solutions for some of those barriers. And that really, from the work that we've done with regulators and other stakeholders, not just within this country, but also internationally as well, is what people want to see is start to make that change. So we have started to look internally as a business of how we can start to change the culture and really promote within our centres and other organisations that we're working in partnership with this culture of innovation. Sorry, I can't hear you, Sophie.
Phew, right. Well, now we've got the mute issue out the way. No one else is going to do it. Yeah, we spoke before as part of that work that you just described. So you did this big review of how technology is being used in assessment as well. So can you give a little bit of insight as to the scope of that review and what that revealed?
Yeah, so as an organisation, we've separated out the assessment innovation team. So we have our assessment team who are responsible for the build of assessments and making sure that they've got the right rigour and getting those across our whole portfolio. But to be able to kind of take a step back out of that market and look at it from outside of the constraints of all of the things that we have to as an awarding organisation, we established our assessment innovation team. And what my team has done over the last 12 months is look not just at regulated provision, but look across the whole end-to-end learner journey in a range of different contexts. So we've done a lot of research on pedagogy and assessment methodology taxonomy at different points of the learner journey to look at what's the purpose of assessment at that point, what's the value of multiple stakeholders, and what does best practice look like within each of those areas. And we also have looked at over 200 technology organisations as well to really start to pull out where technology can add value and where it makes sense to have technology. And one of the things that we're really keen on moving forward with and doing some testing with our internal sandbox environment is looking at how we can connect the data across multiple parts of the learner journey to start to build up a much bigger picture of that learner's and an assessment of that learner at a specific point in time, and then how that builds towards the end to ensure that they're prepared for summative assessment. As part of that, we've also just launched two different things. So we've launched our findings paper, so what we found and what we believe that end-to-end learner journey should look like. But because we appreciate that actually what we're trying to do is really huge, and we need to work with other like-minded organisations and partners to bring some of this stuff to life, we've set up our Assessment Innovation Fund, which is a grant application process for anybody across. They don't necessarily have to currently work in the education sector, but for people who have a really good idea, and we want to work with those individuals to provide them with funding, but more importantly, provide them with the framework to make sure that when we get to the end of pilots, that we've got some really valuable, credible evidence that will help us to move change forward within the sector as well, and get some of those things from an idea into a reality that we can actually offer out across our portfolio of qualifications and other products.
Well, I know that anyone watching this will be keen on all the details for that fund, because I'm sure there are a bunch of people in the chat that are, have ideas on assessment. So what are the main details for when that fund opens and closes, or what type of money is available as well?
So we will fund up to £100,000 per pilot project. That's our initial funding for the next 12 months. Our first window closed back in October, but we currently have a window that's live now and is due to end on the 6th of December. There will be one more window this year, which will be in between the October one and the summer holidays. So we're looking at May time, but we will publish those dates over the next few weeks. If anybody wants to apply or wants to have a chat about it, there is information on our NCFE website. There's a whole page there about our Assessment Innovation Fund, and what we have been doing is just if people contact us either through LinkedIn or through our AIF email address, we've been arranging contact a one-to-one session with one of my colleagues who'll talk people through the process and provide support through that application process as well. In terms of what we want to see, it's really quite broad. So we want to make a change that is going to promote fairness and inclusivity, that is going to maximise the potential of technology throughout that learner journey in a way that enables and adds value, not just introducing technology for the sake of technology.
Mm-hmm.
And also, like I said, really key focus on data and how we connect data across that end-to-end learner journey. And out of the things that we've seen so far, it's been everything from alternative approaches that are much more interactive in terms of the delivery and assessment of functional skills maths, right the way through to kind of credentialing or the use of AI in initial assessment and diagnostic testing.
That's fantastic. Thank you. I can see lots of people getting very excited about that. So thank you for sharing. And you mentioned fairness and inclusivity. So I just like to pick that theme up because, and if I turn to Joe, part of the importance of new ways of assessing is about making sure that certain learners aren't penalised because of the legacy systems we have in place. So I was just thinking about examples for example, in-person assessments and how potentially apprentices couldn't carry on with their learning or qualifications because of some of these systems. So I just wondered what you'd like to see in terms of new approaches which get adopted at scale, and how perhaps technology can help with that fairness and inclusivity as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I think over this particularly exceptional period, there's actually been some really good discussion with awarding bodies and regulators to change the landscape. But it's really all come out of a crisis situation, and what we need to do is make sure that some of these dialogues continue. You know, I mean, and simple things allowing accepting things like digital signatures rather than paper and ink signatures. So that there's a lot of things that need changes, but there's a lot of things that we've got already that we can start using now. I mean, I think in the system and in colleagues, the system that we all work in, I think we can sometimes forget in competency-based learning, where often we're assessing things on pass fail, or you can do it or you can't do it. The assessment is for learning. That we need to go back and have a think about ways we can cost effectively give learners richer feedback, and digital technology allows all of that now. So I mean, all of our systems should be able to give better feedback, provide quizzes and all of these kind of things around the learning, providing blended learning. So again, the learning and assessment goes together. And that sits around things like learner analytics, which was mentioned on really that part of learning that can now be adaptive. And adaptive meaning that the learner is following their own pathway through the blended learning experience and doing their assessments when they are ready. So it's a much more personalised experience. And again, that's the kind of areas where both the learning and the assessment has to flex. I think we're on a journey towards smaller chunks of learning and much less high stakes closed book exams. But even there, where it's closed book exams, there's been a lot of good and creative thinking around using some free tools like Zoom for invigilation, making more use of VR and simulation too, I think is a big part of all of this. Hope that's a starter for 10.
Yes, absolutely. And before we come to Elizabeth, just a quick question here for anyone who feels particularly passionate about jumping in with an answer. Catherine asks, that's Catherine with a K, how are you using the research into neuroscience and learning science to drive decisions in your assessment design? Anyone would like to answer that?
Yep,
So I'm happy to pick up on that. So I'll be honest, Catherine, it is completely new. So playing around with those kinds of technologies is something that we're doing in our internal sandbox environment at the moment. The reason we're choosing to do that outside of the regulated world is so that when we want to introduce it into a regulated program of learning, that we've got the data there to be able to make sure that we're protecting those learners and that those learners are safe. We're really interested in looking at how that type of technology can play a part in that initial assessment and diagnostic part of the learner journey, and support learners to be set up to achieve the best for them based on their skills, their competencies, their assessments, and any conversation you'd like to have offline about that, I would be very happy to pick that up if you would like to drop me an email.
Yeah, and I think in answer to that question, I think in summative and formative assessment, lots of training providers and colleges, we're actually quite good at keeping up to date with what should be happening in learning and assessment, but we don't control the you know, if it's the big end of assessment that's regulated by an awarding body, we don't control that. So we might be chunking our learning up into sensible wee bits and learner pathways, But if it still says it's a 3-hour closed book exam, then ultimately that's the gateway that all our learners have to pass through. So and that's the challenge. But I think I hope everybody's embracing all of this in the summative and formative assessments they're giving learners.
I just popped in the chat as well. There's a company called Pymetrics, which I interviewed, I don't know, gosh, like a good 4 years back now or something like that. And they use a lot of this understanding of neuroscience in terms of assessment for people applying for jobs. So it's kind of combining an assessment platform with that understanding of neuroscience. So yeah, they are out there. And then I thought this worth sharing some examples of innovative assessment work that UFI has grant funded or supported in some way. So Fluence are using AI technology to improve the accreditation of vocational learning for 85,000 vulnerable learners in prisons. And then Open Awards was another one that I sort of dug out, which scaled up remote invigilation. So something Joe mentioned there with Zoom, but they scaled up remote invigilation of controlled assessments for functional skills assessments to avoid the disadvantage to learners and apprentices who are unable to attend school, college or training providers in the summer of 2020. So like you said, Joe, you know, people being pretty quick to work out options during the pandemic when our normal sort of routes were closed down. So we'll come back to that one. I just want to jump in with Elizabeth because I suppose some of the points that we were just talking about were Joe, you talked about, you know, chunks of learning getting smaller and perhaps thinking about the systems that are fit for purpose around that. Elizabeth, when I reached out to you, the idea really was you know, thinking about how we've got sort of formal assessment and then industry is sometimes sort of taking that into their own hands because the outcome of that formal assessment sometimes isn't necessarily the type of learners, the type of employees that they want to see. So Inco Academy, where you work, is the delivery partner for the Google certification scheme. And I thought this was an interesting example of where a company has tried a different approach to sort of signaling the value of adult learners and what they can offer, you know, in terms of employment and skills on offer. So I just wondered if you could share a little bit about Inco Academy and your approach as well.
Sure thing. So again, thank you so much for inviting us to join this fantastic panel conversation. So this question really kind of lies at the heart of everything that we do here at Inco, and I really wanted to give you some context into our why. So we're a part of Inco Academy UK is a part of a global organisation that's trained more than 300,000 people across the world. But this year was really our pilot year in terms of testing our model in the UK. We know as the world is changing, we want to make sure that people from all walks of life are represented and are included within the workforce. And so we are trying to break down barriers to access. Our goal is really to, you know, upskill, uplift and unlock opportunities which empower people who face barriers to opportunities to really entering the labour market to gain those future-facing skills through our programme. And so we're literally committed to being that bridge between the gap where, you know, some learners might have fallen out of the mainstream education system, or those or some learners who have decided that they want to transition their careers and they realise that now is the time to do so, but they don't necessarily have the history and accreditations previously to join programmes. So we were like, okay, we can hold that through our IT scholarship programme here in the UK. We know that at this moment in time, you know, there are major challenges that we are currently facing. The first being that the UK has a major digital skills shortage. The second is that there's a huge lack of representation in terms of having ethnically diverse communities represented in the workforce. And through our programs, we want to ensure that those communities are technically trained. And that's, you know, something that quite really excited us about this Google IT opportunity, because we are giving them those sort of technical skills and also ensuring that our learners are granted the soft skills where they can thrive within the workforce. So I'll just give you a bit more context into that. You asked us how we signal the value of learners who are outside the usual channels, and I just want to take you through this opportunity to just learn a bit more about who exactly our learners are and how they get onto our scholarship programs. So currently we have around 490 learners on our scholarship program. 90% of them are from ethnically diverse backgrounds, 62% identify as female. All of them are underserved, which means they face barriers to employment. But who are they? So Bree, for example, is a perfect candidate. So she has gone through our quite rigorous application process. It's 3 stages. They find it, or shall we say, we find them through whether it be our marketing campaigns or working with her partners on the ground. And then she applied to our scholarship program. In her application, she said she wanted to transition into a career that took her lived experiences. So she lived across the world, but she unfortunately found herself unemployed, and she did not know how she could get into the tech industry. And so she's been unemployed for quite a significant amount of time because she believes that she wants to use tech to transform the world for social good. And so again, we interviewed her, we went through an assessment process where she, through her soft skills and mainly her passion and ambition to really be on this scholarship program, helped us to identify that this was the right candidate. We've taken her on work experience, so she's done some work experience with Salesforce in cybersecurity, and now she has fortunately landed herself a job as a software development apprentice. And the employer has looked at our Google IT certification as a signal to not only does this candidate have the correct lived experience, but actually she's got the technical training to thrive within the workforce. And then we've got Idris, for example. Idris is one of my, I wouldn't say one of my favorite learners, but he was our earlier learner. And he joined us. He was on long-term sick, unfortunately, and he realized that there was no way that he could go back into work because it's quite it was a manual labor role. And so previously he had been really passionate about IT, but unfortunately couldn't continue his studies. And so he did not believe that he could, get a role within the tech industry. And so through our Google IT scholarship program, he went through all of the self-paced learning assessments on Coursera. We are now sort of plugging him to opportunities, and we've realized that he needs to work on his soft skills a bit. So we've committed to 6 months of our time to ensuring that he is empowered to really make the most of his employment options. And finally, we've got Cara. Again, Cara was unemployed, really struggling to get into work, and she found this as a lifeline for her. And so we really wrap our programs around our learners and their lived experiences to ensure that, they can thrive within the workforce. And she has also been offered a role as another software development apprentice. So, we are looking at the industry, understanding what is required on their behalf. They create the assessment. We find the candidates, train them up, empower them, work with employers to ensure that our learners are ready to enter the workforce. And we provide that continued support as well.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing those stories, Elizabeth. I was listening there and I was thinking there's quite an interesting tension, because a lot of what you do there, and it's kind of similar to how Caps Lock were talking about their experiences before. It is that kind of personalized, tailored support and matching service almost. And so I suppose there's a tension, isn't there? Because there's sort of the ability to scale up assessment and to have some kind of not sort of a standardized to an extent system where there's a common understanding of the value on offer, and then there's also the ability to scale. And then there's perhaps some of the newer innovations where it is that more personalized. It's perhaps word of mouth marketing. We talked about the other evening about, actually how to get some of these opportunities in front of people to get them started on this process in the first place. So I suppose my question to the panel is, how do we take the best of the scaling of perhaps assessment that's gone before, but also challenge who this is applied to, where the opportunities land, and that kind of thing in that more tailored way? So is there a way of getting the best of both worlds?
I would like to sort of answer this question. Yeah. I think the way in which we can make the best out of I guess the best of both worlds is by working as an ecosystem. So we think it's super important to work with education partners that have kind of historically been delivering this type of work. We know that our sort of skill set is that we can potentially scale by providing technical support for learners who have found themselves outside of the traditional education system, but we also know the value of how important it is to work with partners that have been doing this work for years too. And so I think we need to work as an ecosystem, one, through our programs, two, with employers, but two, also with, you know, traditional education institutions as well, so we can co-design our approach collaboratively so nobody gets left behind, really. So that's kind of something that we're really keen on doing.
And you're getting lots of congratulations on achieving all those things in your pilot phase, so well done, Elizabeth.
I think there's probably another wee dimension to this, because if we look at it all as focusing and funneling more and more things down on the learner, we still miss an opportunity. I mean, I think just like learning materials, assessments, and formative and summative assessment materials are things that we all create, and there's probably a lot more that we could be doing to share, particularly formative assessment instruments. You know, so I mean, how does somebody get better, let's say, at maths? Well, they get better at practicing, and they get better at practicing relevant things, things relevant to their qualification. And actually, the coding and the things involved in creating an assessment, we should be able to share assessments across all of our different virtual learning environments, or whatever platform we've got, and that saves labour on the teacher or the instructor side, but it gives the learner a richer environment to work their way through as well. So there's probably a whole lot of things we should be doing just to share all the energy all good energy that's expanded in training and assessment. There's probably more things we can do to work collaboratively.
Yeah, I think that collaboration's key. I think as well, like we say we kind of want this end-to-end learner journey, but if you think about the way that things are set up at the moment, we've got different people responsible for different parts of that journey. And I think until we start to work much more collaboratively across organisations and across on programme through a kind of that summative area, sharing data and really making sure that the data that's connected to that learner is visible across the whole journey and to all stakeholders who are involved. It's going to be difficult to do that, but that's definitely something that we're really excited about exploring at the moment. It has its challenges, but for me, that collaboration and that sharing of information is key.
Yeah, it's a really interesting idea about sort of social link data and taking your data with you. So, you know, if you are perhaps using a different assessment platform or a different product with assessment built in, that you can, you know, take all that data with you, and then you know, perhaps choose to share it with those different delivery partners as well. And Janine, I saw in the chat that, you know, mentioned Pymetrics and Fluence, but that you're in talks with them to potentially work out how ways you can work together.
Yeah, so as well as our Assessment Innovation Fund, we also have a number of areas that we want to explore internally as well, where there's a lot of desk-based research, but not necessarily anything action-focused with tangible results. So we're working with a number of partners that we identified through our initial research to see whether we can set up some of these pilots and test that in our sandbox environment. As we've now had the budget signed off for that, so as we enter into the new year and we start to get some of those pilots up and running, we will be sharing the results of those and asking for people to be involved in different ways.
I mean, you have the coolest job. You just get to do all the fun bits.
Yeah, I know.
And then Joe, I saw also, so you with some UFI grant funding were able to explore some of these avenues as well. Can you share a little bit about what the outcome of that was?
Yeah, so I've put, if anybody's accessing the chat, I actually put a link to a whole lot of the work that we've done, which has been around a whole lot of different bits of e-assessment, from VR to the back end, and I think the bit you're alluding to was we've done an awful lot of work around. We think the future in vocational education is about portfolio based learning. It's about people demonstrating what they can do and demonstrating through what they can do, the underpinning knowledge. So it's not about exams or tests or describe or all these things. It's show me and let's see actually. So we think the future is very much e-portfolios. And then what you want to be able to do then with that e-portfolio is you want to be able to link it to your digital certificate, so that an awarding body gives you a certificate that says that you can perform these functions or you can do all of these things. But what an employer wants to see is actually you doing them. You know, it might the certificate gives you some confidence that somebody's reached a level of competency, but what you would like to see somebody actually doing the things. But then you also have that challenge then of having a verifiable portfolio. And again, not naming names, but we probably all know somebody that might have got a job as a graphic designer by taking the best person in the class's folder of graphic design work along to the interview, or perhaps not, but I certainly know. So at the moment, I think employers are sometimes a bit wary of looking at somebody saying, here's my qualification and here's my portfolio of their work. So what we proved basically was we can do, by working with an awarding body, and in our case up in Scotland, SQA, we did a proof of concept showing that we could link the SQA certificate to a digital portfolio of work that was validated by the college, and we could do that through blockchain. And we didn't get it past the proof of concept, but it's all there and ready to roll. And again, awarding bodies, as they gradually, and they will move away from paper certificates again. Paper certificates are COVID carrying, bug carrying things, only kidding. But digital certificates are much safer. And as they move to digital certificates, they actually have the data that you can then hang on these e-portfolios or various other things. You could give the employer a much richer picture with a verified data set, and then doing that verification through blockchain. Sorry, that was quite a long story.
Ooh, can I just add to that as well?
Yeah.
So our course is the Google IT Scholarship program is on Coursera, and what we can do is actually track how learners have sort of progressed through the course and in real time. So we have the data that we can share with employers if they ask, to see, you know, where did our learners score highly, for example? Was it computer science? Like what percentage did they get within the course, and what assessments did they undergo to ensure that they got the score that they did, really? So, and I really love the fact that the digital portfolio can enable people to do that, and we can see that and share that information alongside the certification as well. So I think that's just a real-time example of what is happening within our program. I'm more than happy to share with you our findings so far.
I think that's interesting. I know that in the showcase, Rebecca mentioned, or maybe it was Jane mentioned, Games Academy as well. So, you know, in no way traditional assessment, but through gaming, sort of demonstrating, the idea being that you can then unpick what type of leadership skills you may have, whether you're more leaning towards operational or leading, and then sort of triangulating that with various employment aligned to those sort of skill sets. So some really interesting examples of how to sort of demonstrate that kind of digital portfolio that you talked about, Joe. Janine, I had a question for you. So I think I was looking at, there's this thing called Credential Engine in the US, and they'd mapped, there's 967, 734 or more unique credentials in the US alone, which, you know, obviously there's been discussion around open badges and digital badges for years and years. How do we make sense of all these different initiatives, and what's the role of an awarding body or others to create value in this new sort of more open but more potentially fragmented way of doing things as well?
Yes, it's actually another area of work that we're looking at across the whole of our business at the moment. I think the thing with digital badges and credentialing for me at the moment is I can absolutely see the purpose and the value, and I think that they're really great, particularly as a learner progresses through that on-programme more formative assessment and looking at how we can almost timestamp their skills and the things they're achieving along the way. Where I think it starts to become a bit tricky is looking at the assessment of that in the context of summative assessment and making sure that that still has the rigour that it needs at that point in time. I do think that it is something that organisations, Warden and other assessment organisations, will continue to move towards, but we do need to take a step back and really make sure that there is an understanding across the sector of what the digital badge means, and that it's got the right infrastructure around it to make sure that it has that same credibility, and everybody understands what that badge means.
Thank you. So Philippa has asked a question. I'd be interested in the panel's thoughts about assessing person-centered care in the care sector. So-called soft skills, so essential skills or soft skills. What ways are you seeing of assessing someone's competence in having great soft skills?
So for me, it's mainly still done through face-to-face observation. It's one of those areas where people like to see it in practice, and they like somebody to have written down that they've seen this person demonstrate this particular skill or behaviour in this way on this day and this time. Obviously, through the COVID pandemic, it was much more difficult to do that, and there were adaptations put in place for a number of the skills-based assessments. I think that there is a real opportunity here to look at VR and kind of other technologies like that, where you can literally throw lots of different scenarios at an individual, see how they respond, see what kind of behaviours they're demonstrating, how they deal under pressure, and also look particularly around that patient care aspect of it. Look at how they react to that individual and how their decisions take into account that person's needs, that person's dignity, that person's choice. We're nowhere near there yet, but it's definitely an area where I think we could use technology to not just improve that and widen access or ability to be able to assess those skills at scale. It's also thinking about that individual, that patient or service user as well, and whether actually it's always appropriate to have an observation in that scenario.
100%. Yeah, it made me think, Jo, I think when we were preparing for this, you talked about eye tracking technology and things like that in examinations, and we've got the technology, but I think, Janine, your point about when it's relevant to use it and when the human-centered design around these new systems that we're building is really important.
I think it's all of these things, but coming back to the bit about functional and soft skills, a lot of the challenge is the standards often aren't clear enough about, and I don't mean clear to learners as well as to people who are delivering soft skills, and around things like functional skills and soft skills. When it gets to apprenticeships in England and in Scotland too, this whole area probably needs revisited. I mean, in a way, with the new apprenticeships in England, a lot of the soft skills have actually been pushed out, and we probably need to bring some of them back in. And in Scotland, we're still focused on where core skills. So the broader meta soft skills tend not to be there in apprenticeships. They tend to be skills that people talk about. They should be encouraged, but because they're not in the actual qualification, it means it's very hard for anybody to give time to do training or to develop these things. Because of course everybody just focuses on people getting through the competencies of the qualification. But there's so many things, back to video evidence and things, there's so many good ways that we can capture things like body language and behaviour, communication skills, language, that we need to embrace all of these things and bring them into our kind of assessment strategies.
Mm.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, Elizabeth, because you mentioned one of your sort of cohort members earlier, sort of, great at getting through the content, perhaps sometimes could improve on the soft skills. I wondered how you go about supporting that as well.
Yeah, so there's kind of three sort of angles that we look at in terms of assessing soft skills, or just ensuring that we embed soft skills within the design of our programs. And that's one, of course, communication skills, leadership skills, but we also look at project-based tasks as well for our learners to do to ensure that, that they are thriving within the workforce. And what we like to do is really mirror what a scenario might be within the workplace. And we really look at how we can design a personalized approach around that individual to ensure that they actually have a plan on what they can work on, whether it be their communication skills, whether it be working within the team, and also whether it be, how they apply their technical skills to their communication skills within the workforce as well, because actually that's something that is missing for quite a significant amount of people, really. And we really like to focus on that person-centered design to ensure that we are putting the right candidates in front of the right employees and that they can maximize their potential, really. And that's from the interview process down to, completing the course as well. And one of the things that we like to do is just assess, the dedication to completing the course on Coursera, which is self-based learning approach, and also attending the additional sessions that we have. So we've got, for example, community catch-ups or parent pals, which is a group focused on learners who might have children, for example, and actually what project that they designed for themselves to apply on how they can practically apply their knowledge, and having that presented back to our learners within our community catch-up events too. So there's a few examples of how we do that as well, but we think that's super vital in the design of our program, because we've noticed that quite a lot of sort of traditional systems have forgotten this really essential part of ensuring that people are thriving within the workforce.
Thank you. So we have 5 minutes left. I'd like to warm up the panel guests to start thinking about, that one thing they'd like to share with our attendees. So it could be resource, someone that's influenced their way of thinking, anything else they'd like to share. Anyone who's attending this session, I don't know if you want to come on stage, take the opportunity to share what you're doing in a sort of 30-second pitch, but either in the chat or you can request to put your video and mic on, and I will accept. But whilst that's all going on, Joe, what's the one thing you'd like to share with everyone as a takeaway thought?
Well, it's kind of predictable. The future is digital and in your hand, and all of these things. We need to close down all of the exam halls in Britain. We need to shut them down. So if you've got an exam hall, turn it into something nice. You could use it for lots of other things. But think about flexible learner-centered assessment. No longer think about it's a day in June and it's 2 hours and it's all of these things. That's got to be history. It's not conducive to good learning.
Fantastic, thank you. Lots of Weight Watchers meetups potentially in those halls. I'm just Janine, any final takeaways?
I think there's so many, but if I was to pick one, I think it would be, I think that we are really on the cusp of change. And what I would encourage people to do is, if they've got an idea, to work with organisations like UFI, like NCFE, like some of the others that have been noted on the call today, to discuss their ideas and think about how they can start to bring them to life and really get the support. Because one thing that I have found is that actually there are hundreds and hundreds of examples of where people within that on-programme delivery side of it are promoting individual learning, and then that stops when we get to assessment. We need to start to take some of the really great examples from the teaching and learning side of education and plug those into the assessment side as well.
Oh, I completely agree. And I really loved everyone's thoughts on, challenging the assumptions that it can't be done, because I remember doing an interview on the podcast a good 3-4 years ago, and it was someone within a university who would say, oh, hang on, let me ring up and check, can't we use video? Can't we use this? And lo and behold, you could, but it just took a bit of imagination and, reaching out and discussing and reassuring, but it is possible and it is happening, as you say. So love that point. And Elizabeth,
I would like to say that we're in the era of innovation. So I think this is a real time to collaborate and learn with each other, so that we can design a model that really works for everyone. I do not think that in the next 50 years that anyone should be left behind when it comes to getting roles that they truly deserve. So let's connect, let's work together, let's collaborate and design something really fantastic.
Wonderful. Really, really inspiring stuff. No one's been brave enough to join the stage, but I would like to thank everyone for watching, and look at that, we are bang on time. So thanks to all my guests and thanks to you all for attending. So we're going to find out about the next round of grant funding from UFI. Bye-bye.
Lovely. Thanks all. Bye.
Bye, everyone.